My name is Willy Fabritius. I'm the Global Head for Strategy and Business Development at SGS and Business Assurance. And I do have the privilege to sit on a couple of ISO committees, namely SC27 and SC42. SC27 is predominantly responsible for standards related to information security, cybersecurity, and privacy. And SC42 is responsible for all standards related to AI. And I just recently came back from India, where we had an SC42 meeting and discussed new things related to AI management systems and AI standards in very general terms. We all know about, about AI systems. And many people think AI is a new thing. Sorry to say, during my studies 30+ years ago, we were talking already about neural networks, which are the foundation for machine learning. So it's nothing really new. But what is new is the power of those AI systems, the immense capabilities of those AI systems, and the areas of applications, from medical devices to self-driving vehicles to route optimization for airlines to hedging in the financial market. All those areas can be supported by AI systems. So this ISO 42001 is a game changer because, well, previously there was no management system for this. There were ad hoc processes, and we are coming from the belief that a structured governance approach, a structured management approach is essential for success. Can you do something ad hoc? Oh yeah, we all do ad hoc activities. But if you want to do something repetitive, if you want to do something in a consistent manner, then you need to have some kind of established processes. And these processes, of course, need to be somehow documented, need to be reviewed. And this is where then a governance system comes in place. A governance system provides the necessary assurance to all involved stakeholders that the organization is doing the right thing, whatever that right thing might be. That could be producing good quality products, it could be protecting the environment in ISO 14000, or it could be related to the design, development and deployment of AI systems. And I also would like to emphasize the retirement of or sunsetting of AI systems. SC42 committee is responsible for designing and publishing ISO standards related to AI. And one of the first standards published by that committee was the ISO 42001, which was published in, I believe, November 2023, and which is a typical management system standard. And SGS is very proud to share that we did have already our first couple of audits, and we also have been accredited by the Singaporean accreditation body just recently, after we have audited the Singaporean airport. So SC42 is in charge of designing and developing ISO standards related to AI. One of the interesting outcomes from the meeting we had recently in Delhi is related to ISO 42006. And ISO 42006 is the standard that tells us, the certification bodies, the assessment bodies, what kind of tasks we have, what we need to consider with regard to auditor's qualification, with regard to audit duration. All this kind of stuff is defined in the ISO 42006, which is right now in FDIS, final draft international standard, and we expect the publication of the full standard in the next coming weeks. In terms of developments out of that committee, one of the quite interesting aspects was related to what is called human-machine teaming. And as one would expect, it's about the combination of people and AI systems in a team to fulfill something. And there is this working group where we are trying to come up with typical use cases. And one use case could be, for example, and I'm just making up an example, a pilot of a commercial plane is being supported by an AI system. So translation, there's no need any longer for the first officer. And this AI system would constantly listen to the conversation in the cockpit the pilot may have with ground control, and at the same time constantly monitor all the sensor information that is coming from the engines, from the hydraulic systems, and so on and so forth. And that AI system can then autonomously make decisions what to do, really take over the plane. But at the same time, the pilot is still there, and therefore human oversight is still guaranteed. So the pilot still can intervene and theoretically shut off the AI. So this is the idea of human-machine teaming. We can easily see all kinds of applications. We can see, for example, that an inspector who needs to inspect some kind of lift or escalator or something, that this inspector is being supported by an AI that may be in his pocket and constantly listening to what he says or does, and then provide support. So for example, the inspector would come and say, yeah, I'm now looking at an elevator of a brand name blah 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 with the serial number so and so. Then the AI would be able to retrieve in the background the necessary specifications, the necessary inspection intervals, potentially even provide points of safety issues the inspector need to be aware, and so on and so forth. Now in maintenance, we can see that maintenance technicians might be supported by AIs, and these AIs are then providing the points where the oil needs to be checked, where the lubricants need to be reviewed, and maybe even saying, hey, this belt was changed 6 years ago. Maybe it's time to replace that belt. So really helping and supporting the technicians in their day-to-day activities. I cannot really share too much details about what is on the horizon of the committee, but I would like to point out this is actually published on the ISO SC42 website. But there are two standards that come to my mind. One is related to scheme development, which isn't actually an extension to ISO 17067, which is right now also under revision, and right now that's in committee draft. But very generically speaking, there are a lot of interesting standards coming our way. There is, for example, the standard that is collecting examples of human-machine teaming, which is obviously not a standard as in shall do, a requirement standard, but I think it also highlights ISO's commitment to provide standards for guidance and helping the community to understand what could be done, not necessarily what must be done. Trustworthiness of AI is a very interesting concept. And one of the important things we need to consider is that the EU, as on a regular basis, is leading the efforts in many, many areas, whether this is privacy a couple of years back or whether this is the implications of AI. And the EU has actually published a nice overview what trustworthiness in AI could mean. And there are fundamentally a couple of domains that this entails. there is the human agency and oversight. So it's absolutely paramount that for all critical AI systems, there is some kind of human in the loop. We cannot leave critical decisions to AI systems. Then there is the expectations of technical robustness and safety. Critical AI systems or AI systems for critical applications must always be technically robust. They always need to make sure that safety is paramount. And yes, there is the expectation and requirement with regard to privacy and data governance. Let's have a quick look how AI systems, or very generically speaking, many AI systems work. There's a large corpus of data that is being used to train the AI system. And based upon that, then the AI might be able to provide suggestions, may make decisions, and so on and so forth. So the real question is, what kind of data do we provide it for training? And in some cases, that might include personally identifiable information. For example, when a hospital is scanning cancer patients' microscopic slides, we would expect that the information related to gender and age is there. But why would we need to also train the AI system with the names of the patients? Why with the date of birth? There's a difference between date of birth and age. So when we select the data, or when data scientists select the data for the training of an AI, they really need to ask themselves, is that data actually needed for the functionality of the AI? Because potentially risk with regard to privacy and data governance. Then there is the concept of transparency. And that means, among others, traceability. Where is the data coming from? What's the provenance of the data? Was the data designed and collected by somebody in the backyard or by a reputable organization? Then, yes, we need to be very open. Many data sets, for whatever reason, have some kind of challenges with regard to bias, with regard to diversity. And all those things need to be considered when designing the AI system, because it's about the correct and proper selection of the appropriate data. We cannot neglect the fact that there's also an issue with regard to social and environmental well-being. AIs will eliminate jobs. Let's be brutally frank here. However, I'm also believing that AI systems will create more jobs than before. But that also means that a large portion of the population may be not very happy about the deployment of AIs. So that needs to be considered. And let's be also brutally frank, the training and the usage of AIs is extremely energy consuming. And that is also something that needs to be considered. And yes, there is something that is called accountability. If an organization designs, develops, deploys, and uses an AI system, they cannot say, oh, it wasn't me, it was the AI system. No, the organization deploys it. It's like an employee is doing something stupid, the AI system did something stupid. So accountability is absolutely paramount. And I think all those together really need to be considered in terms of what does it mean to deploy and use AI systems in such a way that they are trustworthy. The governance structures for testing AIs, that's a little bit confusing actually. So there is the governance structure with regard to designing AI systems. That governance structure is coming from ISO 42001 and provides the management system so that AI systems can be designed, developed, and deployed in a controlled manner. When it comes to testing of AIs, we are still at the beginning. Yes, there is a lot of work done that can test, for example, large language models for proper use of language or the inappropriate use of language, but this is still in the early stages. But when it comes to testing AIs, for example, for visual facial recognition, that can be tested. We also know that AI systems can be tested for the recognition of street signs. So that is actually relatively easy. But one thing we need to always keep in mind, AI systems are non-deterministic. On a regular basis, there is more a statistical approach that says in X% the cases the AI system came to the right conclusion. But it's usually not 100%. And I think this is also a very important aspect users and deployers and developers of AI systems are aware of, and if not, they should be aware of it. So the standard ISO 42001 tackles the domains or the areas of trustworthiness, compliance, and reliability by utilizing the risk assessment. The risk assessment, for all intents and purposes, is the cornerstone, is one of the most important, if not the most important requirement of the standard. Because during the risk assessment, the organization must ask themselves, what kind of risks would the deployment of our AI lead to? So let's make an example. Earlier we discussed that one of the domains, one of the dimensions of trustworthiness in the EU model is related to privacy and data governance. So when I'm now deploying an AI system, should I not ask myself, is there a risk? Is there a possibility that my AI system reveals PII, personally identifiable information? Maybe even worse, PHI, personal health information? And if I come to the conclusion, yes, there is a certain risk to that, then I need to implement suitable controls to manage that. I'm not saying that an organization needs to then kill the AI system, but implement suitable controls to manage this. There's a huge difference. But then there is another interesting aspect in ISO 42001, and this is impact analysis. So there's not just the risk related to, let's say, privacy, but then there's also the question, what kind of impact may that potentially have? Now, if that AI system is being used in a clinical environment, helping physicians to diagnose cancer, and for whatever reason that AI system would then potentially reveal the date of birth of that cancer patient whose data was used to train the system, that might be not necessarily great, but there is not necessarily a big impact. On the other hand, if a chatbot that is deployed on the website of an airline is revealing PII of people who used that chatbot in the past, that is obviously something that is totally unacceptable. So it might have the same risk as in probability, but the impact might be significantly different. And all that is being supported by an effective implementation of an ISO 42001 management system. The steps an organization needs to take with regard to responsible usage and responsible implementation of an AI management system are really starting with understanding what the standard is all about. And the best approach is obviously coming to SGS Academy for learning about the standard via our classes we are offering. Because fundamentally, an organization and individuals will need to have the knowledge and expertise that is necessary to implement and maintain such a system. So for example, do we all know about risk assessment? Yes, we do know all about risk assessment, but when it comes to the risk assessment for an AI, there are different categories, different dimensions of risk that must be considered. So for example, how do we address the risk related to leakages of PII? How do we address the risk of, I don't know, related to safety of the applications? How do we address risk related to leakage of IP, intellectual property? All this kind of risks need to be addressed in the risk assessment. Now, in order to know that, well, it's highly advantageous to come to an SGS training class from our academy. And that said, if you have any questions related to the implementation of an 42001 management system, or if you have any needs with regards to training, please feel free to reach out to our SGS team, and we will be more than happy to help and support you on that journey. Thank you.